Hello and welcome to Aging Well. My name is Nathan Lamb. I'm Director of Community Relations and Outreach for Somerville-Cambridge Elder Services. With me today is our awesome guest, Erica Farrell, the Associate Director of the Aging Information Center at Somerville-Cambridge Elder Services. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Nathan. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Aging Well really focuses on issues and concerns that are of interest to older adults and people with disabilities. So I think it's really awesome that you're on the show today because the Aging Information Center is such a great way for people to access the many services and sources of information we have at the agency. So I'm really thrilled you're here to have this discussion with me. So I guess to start, for those who aren't familiar, can you tell me a little bit about what the Aging Information Center is?
Sure. So how I like to think about the Aging Information Center is it really has two primary functions. The first function is called Information Referral, or INR. And the second function is that there are several programs that we have social workers work with people in the field. And so the INR piece is very much, accessing resources, talking with people on the phone about resources. And then the referral piece is a little different, or the program piece is a little different, where they're working directly with people.
Absolutely, and I'm looking forward to discussing both with you. Can we start with the info and referral aspect first? Tell me a little bit about how that goes when people are receiving these information and referral systems, services.
Sure. So we do get a lot of callers from the community, either older adults or persons with disabilities who are younger, caregivers, professionals. They all call up either with questions about resources that we can give them information about and give them phone numbers or websites to go to. And we can also give them information about different programs that we have at Somerville-Cambridge Elder Services. And sometimes that does result in a referral to one of those programs. But yeah, the INR piece of the work we do is very much, we want to provide people with the information that they need and the resources that they're looking for. We're very committed to that.
So it's a free resource.
It's free.
Anyone in the community can call.
That's right.
And one of the things I really like about this program, from having seen it from afar, is that people who call don't really need to know which program they need. It's more, I could use some help in this area, I could use some information in this area. Is that pretty much?
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up. Sometimes people do call knowing exactly what they're looking for. They might say, I need home care services, or I'm interested in the adult family care program. But a lot of people call up and they say, I think I need some help, or I think mom or dad might need some help. And, from there we do have really well-trained information referral specialists who then assess people. They'll ask questions in order to provide people with information that seems like will be of most use for them and give them options. That's the whole point. So we're not necessarily recommending something directly. We're giving people options and information so that they can then make their own decision about what might work best for them.
Kind of a one-stop shop for
Yeah.
when you need information.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned two different types of referrals. There's basically the ones where you can identify somebody who's a fit for one of our programs at the agency, and we have a lot of programs that help people remain independent, healthy in their homes. And then there's also external referrals. Can you give me an example of some of the external referrals that you might come across?
Yeah, so we definitely have, a lot of services at Somerville-Cambridge Elder Services that people might opt into, but, we aren't experts in everything. And so I think we refer externally to legal services a lot. Sometimes transportation services, if somebody doesn't need, home care service, transportation can be a part of that. But if they aren't looking for other services, they just want to ride to the grocery store and do their own shopping, we might refer to one of the community resources like Door to Door. So those are some big ones. Housing is another, we might get callers calling about housing. Unfortunately, we're not housing experts, so we might refer to another resource that we think will be most useful for people to access and get the information that they want.
And the primary topics that people call up to ask about, what are some of those?
Yeah, so I think primarily a lot of people do call about help in the home, which sometimes, like I said, might result in a home care referral. They might be calling, it might be a caregiver calling about one of the programs that they can get paid, like a paid stipend for caring for somebody that, a grandfather, grandmother in the home, so that might be an AFC referral. So lots of questions about how to get help in the home. We get a lot of questions about transportation resources. Another really big one is health insurance. People, turning 65, new to Medicare, public benefits, mass health, and how those interact and can provide coverage for somebody who's aging.
And if somebody is getting ready to apply for Mass Health, is that something where you can refer them to guidance or help with those things?
Yeah, absolutely. We do assist people quite a bit with Mass Health applications. Depending on the level of need that they might have, we also refer out for that type of assistance, depending on whether we think that they're capable of then accessing the help that they need. It is a huge need in the community, or what we've noticed is that that's something people are calling up about a lot. But we do have people who can guide people over the phone, answer questions about those applications. They can also meet one-on-one if they have more in-depth questions. And sometimes that also might result in a referral to legal services if people do have homes or assets. That's something to consider when applying for Mass Health.
Absolutely. In terms of when people are going to call the information center, they think they might get referred to a program. Does this take a fair amount of time? About how much of a time investment are we looking at here? Is this 5 minutes and done, or 15 minutes? You probably should have the driver's license and the tax documents there. Or what's that look like usually?
Sure. I would say for most of our programs, they don't really need to have any of those important documents out in front of them. The time that it takes probably depends on how much information that they're looking for, and the assessment of the INR specialist, so how many questions that they're asking before they opt into a program. So they might be talking with someone for 10 or 15 minutes about the different options, and then at that point the person might say, I am interested in the AFC program, and at that point the INR specialist would then pull out our referral form and then go through, a pretty set of questions that shouldn't take too long. And it's basic information they're going to want to have. Date of birth of the person being referred, their address, obviously name is important. And we do ask a number of other questions that are helpful to have at the point of referral, but aren't always necessary. But the INR specialist would always let someone know that, if they don't have some piece of information, that it's all right, or whether they absolutely needed to make the referral.
You used a word several times that I really liked, which was options. This whole philosophy that we have at the agency about giving people information, letting them know what options are available to them, and then helping support whatever decisions they make. And it sounds like the approach that you guys have there at the Aging Information Center is all about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's really important for people to know too is that, we might refer people to different resources, and if, one of those resources turns out to not be a good fit, doesn't meet their needs, we absolutely would want people to call back and let us know that, they're actually still looking for something, and we'll do our best to try to find something else that fits for them. I think that's really important for, us as INR specialists. We want to make sure that people are accessing and have and are connected with the places or resources that they need to be connected with.
You're there to help.
Yeah.
That's really excellent. Well, I think that's all for our first segment, so I guess we'll be back in a moment. And welcome back to Aging Well. I'm your host, Nathan Lamb from Somerville-Cambridge Elder Services. With me today is Erica Farrell, Director of our Age Information Center. Hello again.
Hi.
So we were talking about the Aging Information Center in the first segment, and I was hoping we could circle back and talk a little bit more about why people call, some of the specific issues and challenges that people come to you guys with, because you're this great free community resource. I'm just sort of curious on what the most common topics you hear from people.
Yeah, sure. So I do think I mentioned this, but calling about in-home help is one of the really big call topics that we get. People are looking for information about homemaking, like having people do chores around the house, as well as personal care. Those tend to be two really big topics that people call about or end up talking with an INR specialist about. Other topics include health insurance. I also talked about Mass Health, but Medicare. that Medicare is a pretty complex system, and oftentimes, people transitioning from, an employer health insurance program to Medicare, they have a lot of questions about, well, this was covered before, and now what will be covered, or what am I going to owe? And we do have, people who can talk expertly about those things. So we get people calling about health insurance. We also get people calling about transportation. As people age, some do stop driving, and how to get to and from to medical appointments, to the grocery store, to the hairdresser. All these become big questions for people. So transportation is also another big thing people call about.
Absolutely. And about how many calls each year do you guys field?
So for the last fiscal year, which ended on June 30th, there were a little over 5,400. And that averages about between 400 and 550 calls a month.
And are these mostly people, if you have the data, I don't want to spring a pop quiz on you, are these mostly people who are already clients and they're calling with new concerns, or are these people who are new to us and really coming to us with new questions?
Yeah, I would say there's actually a good mix. I don't have any firm numbers on that. Some people, also we get people who may have or previously been involved with one of our programs, so know of us, but maybe haven't been involved with us for several years. We get people calling who are turning, 60, 65. We get those calls pretty frequently, and who may not have known about elder services before. We also get professionals calling. It's a good mix, but I wouldn't want to give you any firm numbers that I don't have.
Absolutely. So we've definitely talked about the information and referral services. And this was something that I actually learned in researching the show, that you have a bunch of other interesting programs that you run out of Age Info. And I was kind of hoping we might be able to talk about those a little bit.
Yeah, so we have several programs in the department. I'll just kind of list through them kind of broadly. There's a family caregiver support program, which seems pretty self-explanatory, but people who are caring for older adults or persons with disabilities. We have social workers who will work with them directly. We have a long-term care options counseling program, which is very consumer-driven. We're wanting to make sure that, this is another program for people who are under, 60 or under 65. We want to make sure that they know what their options are if they have some kind of disability or condition that may deteriorate as they get older. We want to make sure that they know, nursing homes that are available, or assisted living options, in-home help, about that. And so there's that program. We also have the SHINE program, which stands for Serving the Health Insurance Needs of Everyone on Medicare. And that's primarily the health insurance counseling that I've referenced before. And then there's kind of a catch-all program called Elder Care Advice. And really we help people with a variety of things in that program. So we have, some people are clinical social workers and some people aren't, but everybody is trained on those programs as well. And they also cover the INR calls. And I think that's really informative for both everyone involved, really.
It sounds like there's kind of a good mix of information and guidance. That and that's good, because one without the other, it's kind of like when you have both, you have the whole picture, because you guys really are the experts. And when you mentioned that final program, the one about giving advice, what was that, Elder Care
Advice, yes.
Is that sort of under that umbrella? Is that sort of what that program does, or is it something different?
It's supposed to, it's also another way to work with somebody more individually and one-on-one, so it takes INR a step further. We can offer people, in the Somerville and Cambridge area, we can offer them a home visit, we can offer them an office visit, or somewhere else in the community. We can meet them, almost anywhere, or we could just talk with them multiple times over the phone. And so it takes it a little bit, beyond the INR, which might just be a one-off, a call that someone might have with a specialist. These programs, an INR specialist might identify that someone could benefit. They'd assess them for these programs. They'd give them the option, and then they can work directly with one of our social workers one-on-one, just in a more thorough way if they need that assistance.
That's great. And the service area and duration and setting. So most of these are for Somerville and Cambridge.
Yeah, there'd be few exceptions. Someone, either the caregiver or our care recipient, would have to be in the Somerville and Cambridge area for that program, but otherwise it's the Somerville-Cambridge area that we serve.
All right. And the idea of giving support for caregivers, what sort of questions do caregivers call the Age Information Center with?
Yeah, So this is also, people do call about different things, but I'd say a call that we do get reasonably frequently is, maybe there's a caregiver who has been caring for, a husband or spouse for some time, and maybe they have some form of dementia and it's all been okay. They've managed it so far, and then the progression of the disease, suddenly they're seeing new behaviors that they don't know how to manage as a caregiver. And so we get that call a lot, like, somebody might be calling and saying, so-and-so has started wandering and I'm not sure how to handle this and make sure that this person is safe, or that maybe they've started yelling or being repetitive, which is something that you'll see with Alzheimer's or dementia sometimes. And so that's what caregivers might call about, and in which case we might describe the caregiver program and explain how that program might be useful working with a social worker one-on-one. We might also give them other resources that they could access, Alzheimer's Association, obviously, if it's an Alzheimer's or related dementia, or, some other community resource that they might want to access as a caregiver.
It's such a great resource. It's like you basically have access to all the things that we have, and then you're knowledgeable about sort of the whole landscape of external services. I can tell you, in doing the outreach for the agency, one of the things that we've settled on as a point where if people remember one thing from our presentation, it's basically, if you have questions about aging, call the Aging Information Center. And basically they can take you from there, and it definitely, I'm getting that sense in talking with you, that's how it plays out along all these different avenues. One last question on this area. Common Medicare cases. I'm just sort of curious, some of the questions that people call up with there, what sort of scenarios are you looking at in those instances?
Yeah, we definitely get, I think I mentioned this, but people who are turning 65 and are eligible and just have questions about what it is and what their options are, because there are a variety of options. We also get people who are calling about their Medicare Part D, which is the drug plan coverage. Sometimes people have several medications and they have to choose between so many different plans, and they need some guidance in terms of, well, what's going to be the best fit for me in my situation. So we get people calling about that coverage a lot. And then, more general questions about how that might interact with, something like Mass Health or public benefits and savings programs, which, both Medicare and Mass Health do have. So ways that they can save on, prescription drug costs or the Part B premium. We provide information about that.
Absolutely. Cost would definitely seem to be a factor when dealing with, I think anyone who's dealt with the medical system at all is definitely familiar with that aspect. And you can provide some guidance on how to proceed, see if there's any options if people are facing pressures with cost.
Yes, yes.
Oh, that's excellent. Any final thoughts you would like to add on the Aging Information Center that I might have neglected to bring up?
No, I mean, I think you kind of hit it on the nose by saying that, if you have any kind of question about aging, or if you're a younger person, with a disability and have some kind of question, we are the resource for you. And we definitely want to make sure that you are accessing the resources that you need to, whether that's through us or through, another agency.
Erica Farrell, you've been a fabulous guest. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Before we close out the show today, I'd like to take a couple of moments to tell you about an important issue that Somerville-Cambridge Elder Services is working to raise awareness about. Stroke is the #1 leading cause of disability amongst older adults, and it's the 3rd leading cause of death in the United States amongst older adults. And one of the tragic aspects of this is that it is preventable if people receive prompt medical attention. To help raise awareness about this issue, Somerville-Cambridge Elder Services is distributing information to raise stroke awareness this September. One of the aspects of that program is a PSA that we have received from the State Department of Health, which we would like to share with you right now.
Jenny and her grandma May, on an ordinary day, when they're in the kitchen, Grandma started to sway. Grandma sounded strange when she spoke, and Jenny had to ask, what if my grandma's having a stroke? I think I better act fast. I think I better act fast. Does her face look a little bit uneven? Does one arm drift down. Is her speech coming out kind of strangely? Then it's time to call 911. Jack and his favorite friends were having lunch in town. When Hank looked up, half his face drooped down. Hank wasn't making a joke, and so Jack had to ask, what if my buddy is having a stroke? I think I better act fast. I think I better act fast. Does his face look a little bit uneven? Does one arm drift down? Is his speech coming out kind of strangely? Then it's time to call 911. Helen and Bob were walking at their favorite time of day. Helen turned to Bob and said, my arm is not okay. Her arm was limp inside her coat, and so Bob had to ask, what if Helen is having a stroke? I think I better act fast. I think I better act fast. Does her face look a little bit uneven? Does one arm drift down? Is his speech coming out kind of strangely? Then it's time to call 911. Stroke can happen anywhere, morning, noon, or night. And every minute after that, more brain cells die. Our heroes acted quickly, and so they all have hope. Precious time and emergency care. You can beat a stroke. You can beat a stroke. Call fast for any sign of stroke. It's what you gotta do. Call fast, call 911. The one you love is depending on you. Someone's depending on you. Someone's depending on you. Someone's depending on you. Someone's depending on you. Someone's
And we're back again. I'd like to close out this episode of Aging Well by thanking my guest today, Erica Farrell. Thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about the Aging Information Center.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I'd also like to thank Colleen Morrissey for all of the research and writing work behind the scenes that she did to make this program complete, and also Margarita Mendoza for the work that she does putting together the graphics. That's all we have for this month. Looking forward to seeing you in October. We'll have more Aging Well then. Thanks again.